When Sakurai put the final touches on Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, the roster had swelled to truly galactic proportions. From the untrammeled nostalgia of Banjo-Kazooie to new kids on the block like Hero, from characters iconic to those of us who press their noses against the glass outside 90s arcades like Terry Bogard, to characters so big universes have been mined around them, like Steve. Masahiro Sakurai and team have truly tried to make a Nintendo game that reaches far, far beyond Nintendo's provincial shores. It has often been said that it will be impossible to once again reach the scale of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate with its surfeit of characters from companies as famously difficult to deal with as Disney. And yet, this creates a puzzle. What could a scaled down version of Super Smash Bros. Be that would still engage and inspire, that would push down the throat lump of regret and stir people to flat out hype at a new Smash on a system which already supports the previous edition? And as well as this, what would the Nintendo of today want Masahiro Sakurai to be building? Because while Sakurai is a genius, an auteur, and a highly respected figure in the industry, Nintendo definitely makes the calls. They requested many of the Fighter Pass characters which were hugely skewed towards third parties in a way that frankly seems surreal for the IP building company we've come to know and love today. Why would they be pushing Steve and Sora? Don't they realize their roster contains such all-time greats as Waluigi? Well, let's rewind to 2015, which is roughly when the early planning for what would then have been the NX Smash must have been taking place. Wii U was in a rough spot. It was the weakest selling mainline Nintendo console ever, and third parties were leaving the scenes in droves. Even at the time when the final Fighters Pass was mapped out, which was likely to be around 2019, the Switch was not yet the all-conquering hero of the console scene. It was a big success to be sure, but the pandemic had not yet turbocharged it into being a contender for the most successful console ever. Nintendo basically needed to bring people into their ecosystem. And what better way to do that than with an explicit Valentine to third party companies? I mean, think about Joker as the first character for a Fighter's Pass, a character that did not even exist on a Nintendo system. It seemed mad at the time, it still seems crazy now. Why would they do it? But I think strategically, it made a lot of sense to build those links. In Japan especially, the Switch version of Minecraft is actually huge. Nintendo's mission in the Switch generation wasn't just to sell a lot of consoles, but to persuade people that Switch could be the place for all these major cross-party franchises to be played on the go. It was a big, bold, confident pitch for casual gamers who had been left on the other side of the blue ocean by years of Nintendo innovation. And there's no better proponent for that approach than Masahiro Sakurai, a man who lives and breathes games and whose passion burned through. I think it's very telling that, with the exception of Piranha Plant, who was a freebie, and Min Min from a franchise from one of their top studios, plus of course the obligatory Fire Emblem character, they generally wanted to push third-party characters to the point where, by the end, the roster was almost entirely third-party. But wind back a decade to before the Wii U panic, and third-party characters were rare. Sonic, Mega Man, Cloud, and Pac-Man are the biggest non-Nintendo icons of their era, so it probably shouldn't be a surprise that in a mascot fighting game, these major mascots made an appearance. The original third-party rep, Snake, was actually a request from Hideki Kojima because Kojima's son wanted to play a character his dad made in the game, and so he got in touch with his old friend Sakurai. It was cool to have additional third-party fights in there, but very much garnish until Ultimate, when third-party fighters became much more significant. But Nintendo is in a very different place now. It doesn't need to reach out and draw people in, but rather has people beating down their door to get Switch 2 dev kits. And financially, their mission is explicitly stated as bringing people to their hardware-software platform through expansive approaches to their software IP. Right now, their priority isn't looking outward, but looking inward to seeing which franchises and which characters within those franchises can be leveraged. We've already seen how powerful this can be in terms of how they've approached recent games. To avoid Donkey Kong Bonanza spoilers, please skip ahead to the next timestamp below. However, we know that the decision to make a game centered around Donkey Kong came from on high in around 2018, maybe even earlier. At this point, the decision had already been made to incorporate King K. Rool into Smash, and the 2018 trailer showed the caddish crocodilian in fine form with a memorable fake-out from the Duck Hunt duo, giving way to a truly dramatic showing. K. Rool is and was iconic, and it was clearly around this time that the decision was taken to reverse Nintendo's long-held apathy to including him in their post-Rare DK offerings and ensure that Donkey Kong Bonanza would involve facing off against Donkey Kong's #1 iconic foe. And frankly, his reappearance in Approach with the title card freeze and everything else felt very Smash in style during Donkey Kong Bonanza. My guess is that a large number and perhaps a majority of players would know K. Rool more from Smash than from his Gangplank Galleon roots. It's not just that K. Rool represents nostalgia, but that if you want people to become as familiar with the iconography of Donkey Kong's world as people are with the key icons of Mario and Zelda, then you need to show them. It may or may not be a coincidence that Tears of the Kingdom, booted up around the same time, became the first title since 2006 to feature Zelda's iconic foe of Ganondorf. I know Calamity Ganon is kind of the same idea, but was ultimately not a physical being in the same way. At that point, it wasn't enormously surprising, though, because Ganondorf appears in a good number of Nintendo titles, but given that Ganon had already been a feature of the previous title, there was no particular reason to imagine that Nintendo wouldn't do a new villain, reconstitute Calamity Ganon, or do something else entirely. It may be a coincidence, but it seems at least feasible to me that somebody at the top of Nintendo sat Eiji Aonuma down and said, "Look, we're building up Zelda big time. We want the series to be an annual event as far as possible, and we want to make it a feature film series. We want you to build up the key characters of the Zelda series. We want more Zelda. We want more Ganondorf." Ridley was also in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and while Ridley wasn't a feature of Metroid Dread, whose story by Sakamoto had been in development for over a decade, and for all we know may be peripheral to or absent from Metroid Prime 4, where the presence of Psylocke suggests a longer-term vision as well by Kensuke Tanabe. However, the Ridley-tastic Metroid Prime Remastered also landed on the system, and I give 70% that the next 2D Metroid game will feature Ridley again, at least in a cameo appearance, and probably, though we may not get confirmation at this, by Nintendo's direct request, because it just makes sense if they want to have their major villain in their franchise entries. So we can see that building up their own core cast has paid dividends and will likely continue to do so. If and when ARMS returns, I have a separate video on that, but I do think it's a when, not an if. A significant chunk of people will be more familiar with Min Min and her world through Smash than through the original classic, all of which leads us back to Smash 6. On reflection, it seems incredibly plausible that Nintendo could make the decision to eschew the third-party focus and turn their attention definitively back to the Heartland Nintendo franchises. Maybe the likes of Sonic and Pac-Man could still get in, but actually the more I think about it, the more sense it would make to simply make this a definitive break and to rebuild a roster that is entirely first-party focused. There are, I would say, 3 key benefits to this strategy. Benefit 1. Differentiation. Smash Ultimate is a huge seller, and they neither want nor necessarily need to replace it. If Ultimate continues to exist as the only title where you can play 18 third-party characters and worlds from series across the gaming landscape, then it will still be able to command a trickle of sales going into the future. And when I say a trickle of sales, I'm talking more sales in a year than many of their smaller series may do in their opening months, especially when you consider that Smash plus the 2 DLC packs are really worth quite a hefty price tag put together. The confirmation of this strategy would be giving it a Nintendo Switch 2 uplift, but the block on this may be Sakurai. While he may dislike these mild revisions and re-releases of different games, I doubt he would find it too problematic to optimize a past title for a new system on which it still plays, but even if Smash remains a relic of the original Switch era, I still suspect it will continue to find success. Benefit 2. No contractual issues. Nintendo's legal department have more than enough to deal with without having to wrangle with Disney and the like for other characters, not just for the few years while the game was in development, but for decades and decades thereafter, during which Nintendo would like to utilize the game. Because Nintendo wants to sell these games not just now, but for decades and potentially forever. Even if it's ultimately as a part of Nintendo Switch Online, it is difficult to conceive a time when Smash Ultimate isn't a major draw for Nintendo, and yet at every opportunity they're going to have to make sure that they have all their I's dotted and all their T's crossed to ensure that Disney, Square, Konami, and other companies won't come after them. It's cost, it's stress, it's hassle. It's not that they won't do it, but having their own IPs readily available makes life significantly less complicated, not just for Nintendo's head office, but in many ways for Sakurai's own creative flexibility. That's because these contracts won't just be about the money, but also about the way these characters are presented, down to the finest details. After all, it's vital for these brands that the characters look right. One of the major things that swayed Nintendo to thinking Ubisoft could put a gun in Mario's hands for Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle was that the team had produced Mario models so accurate that Miyamoto wondered how Davide Soliani got his hands on Nintendo's own model sheets. If Sakurai wants to do Minecraft Steve but have him turn into an octopus for some obscure gameplay reason, it's hugely unlikely that this would fly. But if it's Waluigi, well, heck, Nintendo made Mario into an elephant and Donkey Kong into an ostrich with improbable flight skills, so they can afford to give Sakurai the benefit of the doubt when it comes to Octopus Waluigi. If Sakurai wishes to work with specific franchises, that's trickier, but if he wants, as seems more likely, to try out specific gameplay mechanics first, then Nintendo's field of first-party IP is so vast that it's difficult to imagine he couldn't find a character that would fit the style of gameplay he's going for. The Odyssey team tried a Koopa with arms before they were assigned Donkey Kong as the lead character for their smashing mechanic voxel game. In odd ways, the tighter restrictions of only using Nintendo IP may actually open up far more gameplay possibilities. Benefit 3, it reinforces Nintendo's core IP. Instead of using their time to promote Square's characters or Microsoft's, they're promoting their own characters, characters who may be the next film or theme park or merchandising hit for all they know. Even if the short-term benefit is less in terms of hype and attention and potentially even sales, the long tail of having people become familiar with the new characters is all the greater with a first-party focused Smash. If Smash Ultimate had 89 characters, Nintendo still has 71 first-party characters to build from. Smash for Wii U only had 58. It seemed completely plausible to me that we could end up with a massive 100 fighters after all is said and done for Smash 6, which would make the game feel huger in scale than Ultimate despite not being able to claim the Everyone is Here mantle. And if the Spirits contained some deep cuts when it was focused on the entirety of gaming, imagine how Banandian root deep those cuts would be when Sakurai is pounding down purely on Nintendo's own turf. Some much requested characters would still likely fall between the cracks, Geno being a third-party character, albeit from a Super Mario title that re-released recently, would probably remain out in the cold, and I don't think Eternal Darkness is likely to get the attention more than Alexandra Vyas's Spirit from Ultimate at least. But the fact is that the worlds that Nintendo have at their disposal are huge and diverse. However, there is a huge amount of potential just from within the Nintendo space. There are characters who feel like they might easily have been on the roster already, but for whatever reason haven't been. Paper Mario, Waluigi, Banana Waddle Dee, Tom Nook, Octoling, Andros, Medusa from Kid Icarus, and of course, Super Smash Bros. Own Master Hand. Firstly, then, there are iconic characters, either brand new or reinterpreted, who have been prominent parts of the titles, or at least the advertising, for Switch and Switch 2 era games. Luigi, Poochie, Echoes of Wisdom Zelda, Ring Fit Trainer, Pauline, Captain Toad, Silex, any of the leads from Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Pearl and Mariner, or Deep Cut from Splatoon, and Ayumi Tachibana from Famicom Detective Club, plus of course Mario Kart World's veritable mascot, Cal, all fall into this category, although I would love to see them go deeper cut still, which might include Ashley from Another Code, the Howard twins from Astral Chain, Ravenbeak or the Emmy Robot from Metroid Dread, and of course Andy or one of the other characters from Advance Wars. Then there are characters who have a kind of nostalgic Nintendo cachet, who are obscure, but then the company may feel that they want to pay particular tribute to them. Characters like Takamaru from Mysterious Mosami Castle or Balloon Fighter from Balloon Fight. And of course, there are new characters who might one day feature. I really don't expect to ever see movie Mario in Super Smash Bros., but it's not completely impossible for a series like Smash, I suppose. I expect I will one day do a full-on Smash roster forecast video, but it's very difficult as a one to do because, by definition, every character is pretty much a long shot. I would highly recommend a video I'll link at the end from the ever excellent Talking Sock, which covers a huge field of potential suggestions going franchise by franchise and has some great points such as the possibility of a masked Link from Majora's Mask. Nevertheless, it is not just characters that Nintendo are trying to focus on, but their worlds. Smash is interesting not just because it features characters people might have as an amiibo or plush toys, but also because we see glimpses of what their worlds are like. Making stages that are both bigger and denser and perhaps with more variance is a key part of what they could do to develop Smash in the future. It seems also like an obvious step to build up the single-player mode and do a major mashup of World of Light and Subspace Emissary that stretches from Ulrest to Zebes. One particular theme that's become very obvious in recent AAA Nintendo products is building worlds. Donkey Kong Bananza isn't open world exactly, but contains very big open areas, while Mario Kart World and Zelda have embraced open-air cohesive gaming in a big way. Seamlessness was a particular focus of Tears of the Kingdom's development. Super Smash Bros. Is clearly very unsuited to this in many ways. The load times and the potential for slowdown alone would be horrific, but I could imagine tournaments and modes where there is some connective tissue between the different areas. If you fall off the bottom of the stage in Corneria and you land on the ship in Wind Waker and then sink into the ocean for an endless ocean themed level and then be sent flying forward into the camera where the character doesn't just hit the screen but appears to smash through the screen until the camera pulls back to reveal that we are in the Nintendog's front room. In this way, it will be possible potentially to link level to level, although it might seem a little bit too gimmicky to do. Some elements might be stripped back, of course. The music feature of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate has been pretty much replaced by Nintendo Music now, and while Super Smash Bros. Ultimate itself has a load of third-party classic titles, if Nintendo were to zone in on their own core titles, it seems unlikely that they would want to cannibalize Nintendo Music by making this such a big priority. However, the slight collectathon aspect of the spirits seems to me that something Nintendo may well want to see developed, with more opportunities to deep dive the lore of these various series. I do slightly wonder whether they looked at the data on music usage from Super Smash Bros. Ultimate to gauge their thinking about the development of the Nintendo Music app, and if this is the case, they might see Super Smash Bros. 6 as a great testbed for other ideas of this nature, such as a virtual museum for Nintendo franchises, something I'm sure Sakurai would find interesting, as well as his audience. All things considered then, it seems to me that there's a major incentive for Nintendo to step back from third-party fandom and double down on the core roster. There are a huge number of hype characters who could feature in such a title, and while Sakurai's own views may be difficult to discern, the fact that he's reportedly been quite pliable in the past concerning the idea of weird and wonderful characters Nintendo have assigned him makes me think that he would be receptive to this idea as well. Financially as well as logistically, it seems that it could make a lot of sense. Normally I try to put some specific measurable forecasts on this one, but it's difficult to formulate a specific measurable proposition as there are so many moving parts to consider with Smash. On the question of the next game being first party only, it's the only that's critical, as evidently characters like Sonic and Mega Man still do make a lot of sense, plus third party representation has become the norm over recent years, even if there does seem to be a strong chance that it could be scaled back. I think right now I put it at a 30% chance that at launch there will be no playable third-party characters in the next original Smash. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider sharing it with others as it helps the channel. You can always check out the Patreon, and otherwise I shall see you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.